Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Well, good morning, welcome, and namaste, everyone. I have a bit of news to announce. Another of the early leaders of this center and this congregation left the body on the 8th, on September the 8th, Thursday. His name was John Kasich. I'm not going to say a lot more about him because you will receive a bulletin later today with some information. Suffice it to say that he was very important in keeping this group together in the years 1985 to 1990. So let's observe a moment of silence in memory and of loving condolence to his wife Diana, Diana and family. So with that, a moment of silence. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. So, as I said, those of you who receive our e-newsletter will receive a bulletin later today. Any of you who don't receive the newsletter and are curious, look on the Facebook page. It'll give you access to the newsletter. And I'm not sure whether it'll be up on the website yet today or not. Having said all that, I am very pleased to tell you that we have a guest speaker, a dear friend, this morning, who will speak from his own perspective on the same topic that I had suggested would be appropriate for this Sunday morning. The topic is One Dreamer, Three Dreams, and our speaker this morning is Gareth Young. Gareth and I have been friends since almost since the time I arrived here 12 years ago. He and I served together on the board of what was then called Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta, and became friends and now see one another from time to time. And I treasure his friendship and his knowledge greatly. Gareth is an ordained teacher of the Theravadan Buddhist tradition. I'll let him tell you more about that. but he is very, very qualified to speak to us this morning. Again, thank you, Gareth, for being with us, and thank you for your time. It's now all yours for as long as you wish to speak.
Well, not quite as long. I think people would get terribly bored if I went on too terribly long here, Brother Shankar, but thank you. As Brother Shankar said, the topic is, as originally announced, One Dreamer, Three Dreams. And it's been a rather strange morning this morning. The important piece here is I will be not quite remembering some quotes, because I had written this talk up and it was on a desktop that I no longer have access to. And I had a couple of things in there where I was quoting a couple of texts, including the original announcement, Brother Shankar's original announcement for his talk, which I, of course, don't have access to anymore. So with that caveat, let us get started here. So the original theme was a quote that talked about one dreamer seeing through three dreams, and the practice of seeing through those three dreams with the one dreamer, dreams being the sleep, being this living dream, our dreaming sleep, and deep dreamless sleep. Vivekananda, and I think this was in his famous September 11, 1893 speech, but I couldn't figure that out. But he said something, and this is one of the quotes I don't have completely. The key words in there are arise, awake. Arise, awake. And this is, to me, pointing at waking up from these three dreams. Of course, my practice, my tradition is Buddhism, and the root word Bud, one of the meanings of that word is to wake up. And Buddha talked about waking up from this dream world. So where do we start with this waking up from these three dreams, seeing through these three dreams? We start by seeing that they are dreams. Sounds simple, but it's not as, it is simple, but it's not easy. So I'm going to take this to what might seem an odd place, but hopefully it will make sense. One of the books that was really influential in my early life as a kid was Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Loved that book. I read it maybe 3 times before I was 20 years old. They have recently, or Amazon has recently come out with a series which is called The Rings of Power, which seems largely nothing to do with Tolkien's text, except many of the same characters show up. And I'm just interested in it, and I have this soft spot for Tolkien, so I watched a couple of those episodes, and a few things really struck me. One is the main protagonist, Galadriel, who is one of the main characters in The Lord of the Rings, is this really gentle, majestic, mature, wise elf, and they are immortal in that series. In this particular TV show, she shows up as a kid, then her brother's killed in a war, and her driving energy is revenge. She's out for revenge for her brother, or for her brother's death. It's not something that I think an elf would naturally feel, revenge, but that's the driving force there. She kind of rebels against the elven community, and she starts doing things outside what the king and others would want her to do. She's not the only rebel. There are 3 or 4 others. There's a little one of these little half people who's wandering around, and she goes and she rebels, and she's just like doing things that her parents wouldn't want her to do, and so forth. Several of the main characters are these, they're being set up as outsiders, people who break away and do their own thing. And we're creating a construct here of these great individual heroes. Reminds me of a couple of other things. There's a series of movies out there. There's, I don't know, 20 of them. There's a whole bunch. But there's this Marvel universe, which seemed to be the most popular movies these days, which are like Superman and Batman and Iron Man, several others. I can't remember them all. But they're about these superheroes, these individuals who do incredible things as individuals. And in a sense, these are our modern cultural gods in this non-theistic society. These have become kind of a modern god, these individuals with these incredible superpowers. And it shows up in this world with all these incredible special effects. So this is our culture. These are stories about our culture. This is normalized. It's so normalized that for the most part, when you go watch these shows, you would not notice these as a factor of these shows, because all it is it's transporting our culture into these particular stories. And it's just, we don't see it. But they are stories, and they're actually stories really about this everyday life we have. And what that does, if you can see it that way, it points at the extent to which this everyday life we live, this walking down the street, going to the grocery store, buying food, and responding to things in the world and watching those people around us respond to things in the world, is a story. So much of that story is based on these culturalized norms. You know, the Western, the outsider who goes and does these incredible, wonderful things to save the homesteaders. Very powerful individual performances. We idolize people like Neil Armstrong. So these very strong individuals. This is just the way our story in this culture works. And that story, like all stories, is just an illusion. There is a reality there, but it's not the reality we think. It's not the reality of the story. And waking up to this dream, seeing through these three dreams, starts by stepping back from those stories, from those illusions, and seeing that that's what they are. Seeing that they aren't real. The intensity of this, if you sit down and you watch one of those Marvel movies, for instance, but whatever your movie of choices, whatever your category of movie of choices, you sit down on your couch, lights low, big screen TV, you're watching this thing, you get caught up in it. And there are places where you'll lean forward or you'll cry or, you know, whatever. And I'm reminded of this by this little dog that lies next to me, who doesn't understand what on earth is happening when an emotion arises in me that's in response to what's going on the TV screen. It's not real. We're making this stuff up. And the same with our lives. So it's seeing this illusion is where we start. There's a practice which it's one of the central practices of Buddhism. It's one of the steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is right mindfulness. And there is a broad mindfulness movement in this country today, as you probably all know, and it's a fairly standard practice. But mindfulness is really the central pivot point to allow us to see the dreams as dreams and then to start to wake up from the dreams. The way I have studied and tried to practice mindfulness, there are three aspects to it. Aspect one is mindful memory, remembering what I did that was helpful, remembering what I did that wasn't helpful, remembering what I have done in the past that is skillful, remembering what wasn't skillful, remembering and bringing forward things that it would be useful for me to refine and continue to do, remembering things that I shouldn't do anymore because they get me in trouble. They get me stuck in this dream. They get my emotions running crazy. So that's the first one. Second is being aware. It's noticing. It is being present. It's so our thoughts have a tendency to run ahead of our awareness. In everyday life, we find something going on and we start thinking about it and our thoughts run away. And then we realize we're caught up in this, and mindfulness awareness has just been left behind. So the practice here is of trying intentionally to slow things down so that we can create some stability in that awareness. And once we start to create some stability in that awareness, when the thoughts run away and we catch them, we notice the gap that's created, and it starts to become more natural for us to come back to this awareness. But it's that being present that allows us to notice the dream as a dream. And then the third leg of this stool is ardency, which is a kind of effort. An effort is a difficult thing to think of in this context, but this doesn't happen. We don't just walk around. Good fortune, you know, rocks fall from the sky and hit people on the head and they wake up. So strange things do happen, but we can't rely on that. What we can rely on is effort over many lives, many thousands of lives, however long it takes. Incremental effort can move us down a path of greater and greater awareness, greater and greater insight into the dream as a dream, greater recognition, and towards waking up. So there's the effort of continuing to try and come back, continue to cultivate this practice, being here today to participate in this discussion. And that effort, to me, lines up with my understanding of Raja Yoga, which is, this of course is the month for Raja Yoga, which is, it's not accidental. It's cultivated, it's intentionally cultivating that stillness. So this is starting to see this illusion, this waking dream as a dream. But is that really so different from the sleeping dream? We tend to think, most people wake up in the morning and they would say, I've woken up, this is the real world. How different is this really from what we experience when we're asleep? Now, of course, there's somebody in front of me, if I give them something nice, they'll smile. If I kick them, they'll probably kick me back, right? So there is something happens with this body and with engagement out there. But to a very real extent, what I see doesn't exist out there. It exists in here, in this sack of skin and bones. It's a projection. It has no intrinsic reality as itself. I see something, I talked about the dog that sits next to me on the couch. It experiences a totally different world than I do. To start with, it sees in black and white. Its primary sense is smell. Somebody once wrote a philosophical article on, I think his name was Nagel, on what it's like to be a bat. A bat experiences the world through sonar. What would that be like? There is not inherently out there a world that is dominantly a light-centered world with light existing exclusively in the spectrum between red and blue, basically, right? I mean, that's not it, but that's what we experience. And each of us experiences it so differently because what we do is we project it. And neurologically, I forget the percentages, but it's something like 80% of what we see literally is not out there. It's stuff that we have stored in here that we interpolate between the stuff that comes in. So that's even before the interpretation, which is huge. That interpolation of so much internal data, it's not real. And in the same way, when we sleep, our dreams in our sleep, there's a subject and an object there. They're just internal, right? So we get caught up in this subject-object thing, but it's there in our dreams too. And in those dreams, we can start to see how unreal that is. So there is a sense in which we have an advantage if we can be awake in our dreams. And even in dreamless sleep, there is existence in dreamless sleep. The wise ones truly are aware 24/7. The wise ones are aware in deep dreamless sleep. The self-realized, or the realized ones. Sri Ramana Maharshi, and this is one of the stories that I wrote down that I can't access because the website was changed, but there was a story that was quoted, which I thought was really rather lovely, where he had several disciples hanging around. He was talking about this topic, and one of them said to him words to the effect that, "So, Master, if I see the illusory nature of these dreams, if I see through these dreams, what about all these other disciples of yours?" And Sri Ramana Maharshi paused for a minute and he said, "There are no others." So this is seeing through the dream. The dream includes this creation of a separate self and a separate other, which are things we project. We even project them in our dream when all is going on in our head. There's nowhere else, there's nothing else, and yet we still create this self and other. How do we do this? What's going on? It's nothing short of amazing, but it is made up. It's a story, it's a dream, it's illusory. So there are no others. If my left hand were to be jammed in a door, my right hand wouldn't say, "Ah, you're the left hand, what have you done for me lately?" The right hand would just go and open the door and probably rub the left hand, because they're the same. In some branches of Buddhism, there's a phrase talking about the emptiness of the three wheels. And the three wheels are giver, receiver, and gift. Emptiness means lack of inherent self in this sense, lack of anything that can be held onto. So there is nothing that can be held onto in the giver, the receiver, or that which is exchanged between them. This is exactly what Sri Ramana Maharshi was pointing at, that there are no others. This is pointing at boundless, selfless compassion. Because the other side of there are no others is there's no self. So there are no others is also a way of Sri Ramana Maharshi saying there is no me. I too am a dream. Your experience of me and my experience of me. This too is a dream. There's nothing there. There is no thing there. So I'm going to do something in Buddhism and then try and translate it to the Sanatana Dharma, but understand that's not my home language, so it'll be a clumsy translation, but hopefully I'll get enough out there that I'll bridge the gap and it will make sense. In Buddhism, there's the idea is of nirvana, which is nirvana is the flame being put out, or the flame going out. In the cultural context of 2,500 years ago, fire was a sacred and rare thing. It was a cherished thing. So it was something that had very special cultural meaning. And in the Brahmanic tradition, you had the 3 home fires. So it was very special. And the understanding, as I understand it, is that when a fire went out, it wasn't like we mostly think about it today. It's just gone. It's dead. When a fire goes out, there are the 4 elements. The element of fire is released. Does it go east? Does it go west? Does it go north? Does it go south? Does it go up? Does it go down? It's not an answerable question. It's not a well-formed question. It is just released. And in the same way, and so that's liberation, it's being totally released. So there's the fire which is released. It doesn't land anywhere. This is Sri Ramana Maharshi. He is the fire that doesn't land anywhere, totally released. I was having dinner many years ago now with Brother Shankara and a few other folks, and I can't remember exactly how we got to this point, but some of this translation here, he said, Atman is that within which everything exists. I hope I'm quoting you correctly, Brother Shankara, because it was a long while ago. But a light bulb went on for me there, because Buddhism is well known to talk about an-Atman, no self. But I realized that this Atman in which everything exists is the same as an-Atman. It is just this total release. So in that sense, Sri Ramana Maharshi, nothing there, but out of pure boundless compassion, this nothing there shows up as physical Sri Ramana Maharshi. Totally unattached. And is there in the world, formed a self in the world, to love others, to help others, to teach others. And when that avatar is ready, gone. And there's a veil there, because we can easily think of that as being this avatar forms, it's here for 70 years, and then poof, it goes. But it is instant by instant. Because each instant that Sri Ramana Maharshi is engaging, he is allowing this Brahman, if you will, Atman, non-self, he's allowing that to arise in the world, to act in a particular way with a particular person, and then releasing completely. So from the inside, once that is released, once that's done and it's released, there's nobody there again. We can still see that sack of skin and bones, but there's nobody home. There's just this total release, because there is completely seeing through the dreams. And when that allows itself to come into the world to help, it is from a place of seeing itself as showing up in dreams. There are conversations in many spiritual traditions, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Sufi tradition. It's there in the it is there in the Sanatana Dharma. Yogashananda talked about meeting his master this way, of actual encounters in dreams. So Yogashananda talked about meeting his master in his dreams something like 10 years before he met him in the flesh. So that's, I think, no, not, I'm probably getting the name wrong. It was the guy who wrote the book that Steve Jobs used to carry around with him. Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yogananda.
Yogananda. Thank you, Tom. I realized that. Thank you. So Yogananda is the guy I'm thinking of. So what's the difference between walking around, recognizing the dreams, and allowing oneself to manifest in a dream and walk around in somebody's dream, and allowing oneself to manifest and walk around in this world? The wise ones do this, and they are an indicator for us that this is possible. And that's about what I have for you today. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Let's talk. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Okay, I'll jump in here. Thank you very much for this, Gareth. Really enjoyed your talk without your notes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sometimes things turn out better that way. I was just something that came up while you were talking about, everything's in here, and yet, I was thinking we have these bodies, but, they are naturally very limited and have the purpose of, containing whatever this is for a period of time. And I have a long Buddhist background and foundation as well, and it's still there. It doesn't go away. And I feel connected to all living things, and sometimes I'm like, well, I am this being that loves all creatures genuinely, but I'm also this creature that will kill a mosquito. And I'm not saying that I feel bad about that, but just something funny happened the other night. I was reaching into my sink, and one of those very large black bugs that people want to call tree, palmetto bugs. Well, they're not. They're American cockroaches, but they're huge. And they fly. Anyway, I'm usually fine with them. If they're my house, I'm like, hey. But this one was suddenly appeared out of nowhere and was crawling up my arm. And I was already kind of anxious that day. And my sort of primitive brain had a response well before my conscious brain could. And it just, I shrieked. I didn't even know I could shriek like that. And I was brushing it off, and I was skidding backwards. And I fell into a laundry basket full of clothes, which I was, and I was sitting there. I did get quite a bruise on my arm, but I was fine. And I was sitting there in this basket, looking at that roach that was now on the floor, being very still, like, what just happened? And I felt like in that moment, I felt we were the same. We were both sitting there going, what was that? Right. So I had that moment there that went from one thing to the other. That was very.
And thank you. It's a beautiful story. And we could spend hours unpacking that, actually, I think, Cindy, but I'm going to spend a minute on it. So I won't project on you, but I'll sort of bring that to my own experience. I know for me, maybe 30 years ago, I would have had a particular reaction if I saw a cockroach anywhere in the house, and it would not have been a good reaction, because I would have immediately seen the other, and I would have immediately seen it as an unpleasant thing that did not belong in the house, and I would have reacted accordingly. So after many years of practice, my reaction is like yours. I don't see it that way. It lives here too. Hi. Now, if we have too many of them, I don't want them completely taken over. So I have to figure out how to deal with that. And we each figure out our own boundaries around that and how we will deal with that. But, we share a house. And I share, this is a body. There's some physical structure here. And it depends how you look at it. You can either say that I share this body with myriad bacteria and viruses and algae and all sorts of other fungi and all sorts of other things. Or you can say that this body is in part comprised of that. But however you get there, it's seeing this body very, very differently. So moving down the path, the practice path, this starts to open up, and we start to see my idea that the cockroach is some hostile being that's invaded my home is just a story. And I start to not really intellectually see it as me, but just more naturally feel oneness. And that's a much more natural way for this to express itself. Those little moments where we get caught by shock are just beyond the edge of our practice, right? And if we keep on working at this, why would we not feel this thing on our arm and not react? And we would. Eventually. Aspirationally, 20, 30, 50,000 lifetimes down the road, whatever, right? But aspirationally, it's the same thing. So once we start to see this, the rest starts to make sense. And that waking up, it's like waking up in the morning. It is an absolute turning point. Everything goes upside down. Because there is no longer a self that sees. There is only this non-self world. There's only dream. There's only the dreamer, which is not really a dreamer anyway. I mean, there's what is that dreamer? And then there's the dreams, and it is all seen as a dream. Anyone else?
Good morning.
Hey, Frank.
I'm Frank. This isn't what I originally wanted to say, but as far as cockroaches, water bugs, and ants, the two of you are a lot more evolved than I am because I see them in my house and I take it as a personal reflection of my cleanliness. Like there's something wrong with me. Like, what am I doing wrong? But that's not what I originally wanted to say. When you were talking earlier about the dream and reality and our story, it reminded me of one of my gurus that I've not really met in person, but a woman named Byron Katie, who talks about self-inquiry and questioning your thoughts. And she talks about everything is just your story, and who would you be without your story? And it's really powerful. And ironically, when I read her story, she went through a lot of stuff in life, and she was living in for a while, she was staying at like a halfway house, and she was sleeping on the floor because she didn't feel like she even deserved to sleep in a bed. And interestingly enough, a cockroach crawled over her foot, and for some reason, self-inquiry came to her. How, I don't know, but I just thought it was funny how I wanted to talk about Byron Katie when I heard you, and then you talked about cockroaches. And as I was waiting, I said, Byron Katie got self-inquiry through a cockroach. Don't know how that happened, but I thought that was interesting. So anyone out there, if you want to try Byron Katie, it's a good way to question your thoughts and to help with recognizing that things are just a story.
Thank you, Frank. A couple of thoughts to that. Thought one, why did that all come up, the Byron Katie, cockroach, Cynthia me talking about cockroaches? Don't know, but what I have found is the more I am able to let go, the more likely those strange, serendipitous things happen. The universe is a lot smarter than we give it credit for being. And if we try and constrain it in this little thing called me, we are resisting so much. Once we start to let go, it's amazing, just amazing. The idea of a story and of me, and this showed up in a couple of things you said there. Why do we need a story? We have this cultural thing where we're trained, you know, and Nisargadatta said, one of my great teachers, he said, when you were a child, your parents told you you were a boy, and you believed them. And I did. I took it hook, line, and sinker, repeated it many times a day, and built so much on that fact, on that statement. It's not true. It's not absolutely true. Yeah, in a relative sense, sure, there's some utility there if I want to march around and interact with people, but it is not true in the sense that I understood it to be true. And I used it as a foundational brick to build this personal story, which becomes my identity, which I hold on to and I think is important. It's not. It's just not. And if we are lucky enough as we get older to be released gently from this body, I just watched my father go through a process. He just died. If we're lucky enough to be released gently from this body, that sense of identity, one way of a lot of people will look at it and say, well, oh, just it's horrible, the loss of dignity and so on and so forth. But another way of looking at it is there's a total letting go of all the stories and all the self-identity. Something really beautiful about that, because we can't take those stories with us. They're not who we really are. There's something we made up. We continue to make it up. That's part of the dream. Anyone else?
Yes, I do want to break in for just a moment and so that people don't go away with the wrong story. Swami Yogeshananda's master that he encountered in the dream 10 years before we met him in person, was named Yatishwarananda, and he was a Swami of the Ramakrishna order. And at the time that Yogeshananda had that dream, he didn't even know the Ramakrishna order existed, let alone anything about Ramakrishna. So it was not Yogeshananda, it was Yatishwarananda. And so I just wanted to correct that, lest people go away with the idea that Swami Yogeshananda, who founded this center, that his spiritual master was Yogananda. Whatever Swami Yogeshananda thought about Yogananda, I don't know, but his spiritual master and his teacher, his guru, was Swami Yatishwarananda.
Thank you for that, Brother Shankar. And you just told me something I didn't know, because Tom caught what I was trying to do, which I was referring to a story in the autobiography of a yogi, which was Yogananda. Nothing to do with Yogeshananda at all. And he met his guru in a dream 10 years before he met him. I did not know that about Yogeshananda, Swami Yogeshananda. So we got two parallel stories there, which is...
And I don't know that it was 10 years. I never heard it directly from Yogeshananda, but he did encounter his teacher in a dream before he met physically.
Thank you. Anyone else? And cut me off, Brother Shankar, when the clock says it's an appropriate time. Otherwise,
we're good. We're good. We've got plenty of time. Let her rip. This is what this congregation loves and is good at. Let's have some conversation.
Wanted to bring out some point, if you can hear me.
Yes,
I can hear you.
You see, the subject is very complex. When you simplify it, it is called oversimplification. If you get lost in it, they say it is mysterious. But the real thing is, we are not apt enough to get a grasp over the wisdom of the nature around. That's the reason why we make our stories. For me, for example, let us go the spider or the cockroach, whatever it is. And you said very properly that there are so many bacteria in the body. Not only the body provides them a good house, it gives them a good opportunity to grow because they are beneficial for the body. But the moment a bad bacterium comes, the body does not tolerate it. And therefore you get diarrhea. So this kind of what is called discrimination or discretion is a built-in feature of the body. But the body goes even beyond that one. And therefore I'm going to the story about the dreams. For example, in Mahabharata, the story, and Vyasa has seen so many things, and he has put it in different story forms. So one story that Uttara, a princess, sees in a dream a young man whom she wants to marry. When she wakes up, she does not know what's the name, where is he really there or not? So she calls her assistant and she says, I saw a young man, a prince in my dream, and I want to marry him. I will not marry anybody else. So the assistant says, keep on describing and I will draw a picture. What are his eyes like? Exactly what the police detectives do nowadays. Show me the eyes. Are these the eyes? Oh yeah, these are the eyes. Show me the nose now. Is this a nose? Yes, nose. So from all these things, she creates a picture and she says, ha, that is the prince which I saw. And they found out he was Arjuna's son, Abhimanyu. So the reality, the dream, they are so interwoven. And although we say that everything is up here, that also is not a complete statement. There is not more beyond which this one is only like a radio station. The waves are all the time, but radio station picks up that, others don't. And we also pick up only when we tune in on a particular station. So my feeling is some messages are continuously moving around us. We are equipped to catch them, but all of them we cannot catch. And we do not catch. Instead of accepting our ignorance, we give different kinds of explanations. Scientists give their explanation, the mystics give their explanation, and so on and so forth. So if the same dream was seen by Yogananda and Yogeshananda and Yatishananda, to me, it doesn't matter whose body was it. But there was a message circulating in the world, and these three great figures, they picked up the waves.
Yeah.
And that's the way I look at it.
Okay, thank you. Couple of thoughts. Thought one, yeah, it's not all up here, but the stories I tell are all up here. But this is a self-created thing. So there's this bootstrapping into existence of all of these stories. The observer, the dreamer, is that which can step back from this, and it is smaller than a pinhead and fills the entire universe. It is reality. And it is incredibly simple. Incredibly simple. The stories we tell, what spins out of it, is massively complicated. It gets more and more complicated because the nature of story, which is the world we live in, dream, the nature of that is it almost has to continue to make itself more complicated. It just a self-fulfilling thing, it explodes. The Big Bang continues. This is the Big Bang out of that pinprick that's the universe into this, and it's still going on. It's incredibly, incomprehensibly complicated. But reality is really simple. It's just not easy to get there. And this is where we get into the four yogas, right? And the different paths. There are infinite paths, but only one goal, however that phrase is. But it is when that turning point happens, when you no longer react to the cockroach running up your arm. When that turning point has happened or happens, and reality is what's seen first, the dream is completely seen through, that is an instant outside time, because that's already there, beyond time and space. Incredibly simple, and that's just, it's incomprehensible. I'm starting to realize I'm talking gibberish, so I'll shut up. Next. Anybody else?
I'll say something. I assume everybody can hear me.
Yep.
Okay, so as this relates to my current life situation and practice, there's a book, I think it came out in the early 70s. It was called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it really made a big impression on me at the time. For one thing, it gave meditation instructions. And there were a whole lot of books. At that point, there were a whole lot of books about Zen, but most all of them were just about the philosophy and ideas, and they didn't give any instructions for practice. And people that were into Zen and Buddhism in general tended to talk about it a lot, but not do it. So anyway, the book made a big impression on me at the time. But the title, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, the idea there is Suzuki Roshi wrote the book. He was a Japanese Zen priest who came to the United States and started the San Francisco Zen Center, which had a big influence on a lot of young people later on when there were the hippies and so on. So anyway, the basic idea, the big idea, he said, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are only a few. Always try to maintain the beginner's mind. And I realize I've definitely fallen into the story of the expert's mind that has few possibilities. And my big the edge of my practice, the thing I'm working on now, is trying to get back to the beginner's mind. And I've had some success with this, and it feels wonderful. It feels like, I compare it to graduating from high school and having your whole life in front of you and all of these possibilities. If I can just drop my illusion of being an expert, which I built up over the years from doing a lot of things and reading a lot of things, and just, pride and ego and status, I've developed this facade of being an expert. As I drop that, it feels wonderful. It feels great to be a beginner. I don't know how much longer I have to live. My friends keep dying, but however many years I have left, I hope to become more and more of a beginner and open up to more and more possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'll bridge that back to what Barbara just said, which is taking that not in here, but capital M mind. So we tend to Zen mind, beginner's mind. We personalize that. I'm an expert and I should approach things with a beginner's mind. But the real beginner's mind is before there's an I. And that's the complete letting go, right? So if there's something I came across recently that I really like, in many Buddhist schools, there's this idea that everybody's a Buddha, they just don't know it, or everybody has Buddha nature, they just don't know it, which is kind of cool. That and a quarter get you a cup of coffee, right? But there's a really important point in there, incredibly important point in there, and it's this point. There's the turning point where realization happens, where we realize we're a Buddha. And the metaphor that I came across that I really like, it's like driving a car, or being allowed to vote. At some point, you're 18, and then you're an adult. We're all inherently adults. Small children are inherently adults. They just got to hang around a few more years. So the beginner's mind is incredibly important, and there's something that happens with that beginner's mind, or something that is possible, more likely perhaps, with that beginner's mind.
Sometimes we define an expert as someone who knows more and more about less and less,
Right.
until he knows everything about nothing.
That's right. And time and again, the wise ones who let go of knowing anything write prodigiously. And I've read a number of books where realized beings will quote from books they've never even read. What's that all about?
It's interesting, Gareth, that the poet and illumined soul, we'd have to say, Kabir, came at this beginner's mind this way. He said, one of his poems ends this way: "Who is this man who can go to the marketplace and shop for his family, come home and take care of them very well, and that many people call Kabir? I don't have the slightest idea."
Yeah.
There's a wonderful book I've read a couple of dozen times called No Self, No Problem by Anand Thubten. And he talks about a lot of this stuff. And, you know, like what Brother Shankar just said, and what we're saying, in split seconds, when I get a glimpse of this nothingness, sometimes it's really scary. And I don't know if it's scaring the ego or what it's scaring, but I get these little split seconds, and they're very minute, of this weird, I don't even know how to put a word to it, this nothingness, or this awareness, or this awareness of nothingness, or nothing of awareness. I don't know what it is, but it comes in little spurts. And sometimes if I'm sitting down at a chair like this, I grab the chair, like I gotta hold on. And I'm like, and it just has this weird kind of, again, it's hard to find words. Sometimes I feel out of body. Sometimes I feel, it's really weird. And sometimes I can't even find words to describe it, because it's more of a sensation. But it's interesting, but I keep going, I keep reading, and I keep trying to put this into practice. And each day, because I said a long time ago, the greatest thing I learned is that I know nothing. But I keep realizing each day how much I really don't know. Like, I thought I knew nothing 10 years ago, and over the last 10 years, I'm realizing, wow, I know even less. I don't even know what I thought I knew yesterday. So it's kind of scary that, like Anam Thubten said, Buddhism isn't about getting more, it's about getting less. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll give you just a little thought on what you just talked through. It is very common in that sort of dropping off for fear to arise. Very common. Question is to look really, really closely at what's going on there. Intentionally try and be with that experience. What's dropping off? What's dropping off what? Where am I in this? It's not so, and it is beyond words. I can't give you words. You have to figure it out. But it's something to stay really close to and really pay attention to, see what's really going on there.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Gareth so very much for taking time with us this morning. He described before everybody else signed on what kind of a morning he'd had, which was such a full moon morning. It is a full moon today. And everything went haywire about his access to his computers. And so he's actually talking to us from his wife's computer. But there's more. Gareth mentioned, he just mentioned in something he said, that his father had died. Well, he only found that out this morning. So it would have been very legitimate for Gareth to ring me up and say, look, my father just died. I have to deal with this, and so on and so forth. But being who he is, that's not what he did. He told me a bit about how his family is dealing with it and so on. And then he simply moved on and was available to us this morning to do this. This is the man that I've known for so many years and seen in so many contexts. And the dinner that he was talking about was a very interesting dinner, this dinner that we had some time ago. It was at the home of Dr. Ben Johnson. And it was about some activities that Dr. Johnson had us participating in. And so there were so many memories. But making a story out of these, in Sanskrit they're called upadhis, limitations. we limit ourselves by what we believe in about ourselves, about the world, because as Tom Carr said about describing the beginner's mind, and of course this is one of the great messages of Don Juan Matus, the great Yaqui, Toltec teacher. You limit yourself from knowing about infinite potential, infinite possibility, by believing in what you believe. So as also someone said, it is about having and believing in less rather than more that allows us to penetrate beyond these dreams. Any final thoughts at all, Gareth?
Thank you, no.
All right. Well, we'll just sign off in our normal way. This is Swami Yogeshananda's translation of a lovely ancient prayer. Let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May this infinite peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, yes,
I was just going to say thank you all, and thank you, Brother Shankara. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
yes. So any final thoughts from anyone? Anything anyone would like to add? All right. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we be always in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Om Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Any final thought from anyone? Well, thank you so very much, all of you, for coming. This is what we do. And this morning, Gareth helped us do it well. So next week, we'll talk about something else. And then on the final week of this month, we'll have an open forum on Raja Yoga and how it shows up in our lives, each of us who chooses to participate and talk. All of our classes are ongoing, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So any of you who choose to participate, please do. And once again, Gareth, your friendship is treasured. Your wisdom, which is beyond knowledge, your wisdom is treasured. And may you and your family be at peace with your father's death. I know from remembering my own father's death that it has surprising ways of appearing in our awareness as we deal with the fact that that person is no longer accessible to us. So, goodbye, everyone. Until next time.